We are here for State Treasurer Best Practices, so very excited about this session. It's going to be led by Mark Funkhauser. Mark is president of Funkhauser and Associates. He's a municipal finance expert. He spent decades in government service and was also the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri during the Great Recession. He was most recently the publisher of Governing Magazine and the founder of the International Center for Performance Auditing and a founding member of the Association of Local Government Auditors. He's dedicated much of his career, research, and writing to advancing the public sector performance auditing profession and strengthening its real-world impact. So with that, I'm going to invite Mark to come up to the stage. Thank you very much, and I'm going to head backstage.
All right. Thank you, Michelle, for that introduction. I'm looking forward to this program this afternoon. We have three great speakers for you. We have you, Rachel Eubanks, Treasurer for the state of Michigan. We have Tyler Trout, CEO and founder of DebtBook, and Justin Marlowe, a professor at the Harris School of at University of Chicago. And we're going to talk about current issues that state treasurers are dealing with, and how the climate, both political and economic, is impacting their work. So with that, I would like them to come on stage now. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I have a series of questions that I'm going to ask each of them. I'm going to encourage them to comment on what each other has to say. If you have questions for us, please put them in the chat, and we will keep track of those, and I will ask those toward the end of the discussion. And Treasurer Eubanks, I want to start with you. And why don't you tell us what your top priorities right now are in the state of Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, Mark, I think if you were to ask me this, I'm now 6.5 years, almost 7 years into my tenure as treasurer of the state of Michigan. And if you're asking me this many of the other years, there would be a lot of different things I'd be looking at, technology, some policy pieces, things around employees. But really the number one thing right now that we're focused on is technology. Whether it's improving our legacy systems, making significant investments in our technology infrastructure, because we need to reduce legacy risk from systems that are decades old, improve customer service, and improve, importantly, the employee experience, making sure that we've got the kind of technology that people get excited about coming to work every day and wanting to use, and not have to, sort of stumble through like old dinosaur technology or anything like that. And then I think there's an interesting interplay here between, new technologies coming down the horizon and what it means for our workforce. So, the advancement of AI technology, in the government sector, we are not immune from that. And thinking about ways that we can, help do our jobs better through use of this technology. This is, something that can help us do our jobs from a very small level, such as, chatbots, to really analytical processes, trying to, find database reasons why we might want to do our job differently. So really right now, it's a huge focus on technology in a way that in my previous tenure hasn't been as much of a focus.
Well, thank you for that. And so, Tyler, you have hundreds of clients across the landscape of the United States, and state and local government treasurers and CFOs, folks like that. What do you see as their top priorities, and how do those compare to what Treasurer Eubanks just told us?
Well, we primarily participate with treasurers and CFOs as it relates to their technology initiatives. So selfishly, that's where we are spending most of our time assisting those organizations. And I thought that Treasurer Eubanks laid it out in a really lovely way, and I agree on those things. I made a couple of notes here. We have always believed in the promise of productivity gains from technology solutions. And we in government and state government treasurers, local government treasurers, even in higher education and healthcare, we have really important jobs to do. Those organizations, they need a certain amount of productivity. They need information, they need hours, they need productivity to go and do their jobs at an acceptable or exceptional level. software should deliver material gains to those organizations. There have been lots of struggles, lots of frustrations, and we can talk maybe later in this panel about the type of investment, the capital investment coming into government, treasury. But I would say, as we engage with treasurers around the country, finding ways to combat some of the workforce challenges that are really well known. Younger professionals, maybe more entry-level professionals coming into the organization, not surprised to hear Treasurer Eubanks say, we want to give our people tools that they really enjoy working in. It's competitive. If you were coming into an organization and you're handed PDFs and Excel spreadsheets and told to go and do all of this tremendous work, when the organization that is down the street from you is using modern tools to automate some of that operational work, to enable those people to have more impact inside their organizations. Naturally, if finance professionals want to go, they're going to want to go work inside the organization that's giving their people the tools to go and be as successful as possible. So recruiting, yes, but then even when you have the job, having the tool available to institutionalize the knowledge. We work with a lot of state treasurers, and they have a cash manager, debt manager, investment manager, different team members who may have been there for 10, 20, 30 years. And many of those individuals are trying to retire. And we have many examples where they can't, they cannot leave because they are the sole or one of the few individuals that really understands how to go and access the information to serve the broader teams, broader organization, or the community. So I think organizations around the country are trying to find a way to really institutionalize all the knowledge that exists across these teams. They want to increase productivity, and then they see AI and they say, gosh, can we benefit materially from this? And I'll be really excited later throughout this panel to talk about that, because I see that every day, and I think we should all be really excited about how it can help us.
And so, Justin, you collaborated with Tyler and I on a big survey of government treasurers and related positions. And you also have done lots of research and writing in this area, and you interviewed Treasurer Eubanks, among others, for your public money pod. From those sources, what do you see as sort of the emerging top priorities for these public finance professionals?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the free commercial there, Mark. We like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, as they say in the podcast business. But really is a great opportunity to be able to survey kind of the broad landscape. I would agree with everything Treasurer Eubanks and Tyler both said in terms of the kind of immediate challenges around human capital, technology, making systems more reliable, improving the employee experience. That's a thing we hear a lot. I would say, I would add to that maybe 2 other kind of broad lines of work that we see, particularly state treasurers being asked to participate in. One would be, for lack of a better word, kind of envisioning what our very uncertain future looks like. A lot more emphasis these days on stress testing fiscal systems, a lot more emphasis on trying to come up with more effective cash flow forecasting, some of the treasury management things that Tyler alluded to a little bit ago. Thinking very differently about what debt refinancings look like, thinking very differently about what investment portfolios could look like in a much more volatile interest rate environment. All of these things, are things that state treasurers do, but they're being asked to do them in kind of a more expansive and more sophisticated way, and that requires, in some cases, very different technological tools to be able to do that analysis on the fly. So that kind of envisioning a very different future, I think, is one really important line of work. And a second would be expanding the capabilities and the capacities of what state treasurers are doing into all kinds of areas. You don't typically think about things like financial literacy when you think of state treasurers, but as it turns out, most or all of them these days are involved in some sort of an initiative to try to improve the financial literacy of regular people, personal financial literacy. And the public policy imperative there makes a lot of sense. If you have future taxpayers who are making smarter decisions about their own money, they're going to be in a much better position to contribute both as a taxpayer, but contribute to the economy, contribute to their own welfare, their own happiness. And so state treasurers have kind of picked up that mantle. Same with things like financial inclusion, finding ways to provide access to financial services, access to savings vehicles, all sorts of things that, again, we don't typically think of as a state government imperative, but treasurers are being asked to do it now because the demand is there And they have some, maybe not all of the capabilities, but some of the capabilities to step in and play that role. That's an important, I think, new development because it also requires a very different sort of technological toolkit. You're being asked to reach very different kinds of taxpayers. You're being asked to reach completely different populations. You're being asked to communicate in very different ways, to interface with other parts of state government in ways that you might not be used to. All of that requiring different kinds of technological capabilities. So it's an exciting time, it seems like, to be in that space, but it's also requiring that treasurers are being pulled in a lot of different directions, and sometimes with the tools they need to do it, and sometimes not.
Yeah. So it's interesting, Justin, you say, what you described is what I've seen basically throughout my career is the rapid expansion of the role of government finance professionals from just being sort of the accountant and keep track of the ledgers and the debits and the credits to a much broader role. And that brings with it quite a few challenges. So Treasurer Eubanks, talk a little bit about the challenges that you have been trying to deal with as you try to achieve your priorities, particularly the implementation of new technology.
Yes. In a lot of sectors, the embracing of technologies kind of comes with solely upside risk. And at the government side, there can be a lot of challenges and a lot of downside risk. I mean, I think you'll find people will say, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's really, no reason why we should take on that risk because changing, major systems from a legacy system to a modernized system comes with risks under any type of circumstances. And oftentimes, when we go out to procure a new system through our, state procurement process, this is a very lengthy period of time. Technology can change, and during the period of time we're even going through the procurement, and then you may not get, hundreds of bidders. You may only get one or two who's really qualified for that specific area that you're looking to implement the technology. So, you're not getting a huge number of options. And then on top of that, you've got to think about, okay, how are we going to do this in the most cost-effective way that has the least risk to, downside risk to implementation? Because, your systems are often supporting really critical governmental programs and services. In our case, it's all the state revenues, treasurers have, you talked about cash and debt management. Those are critical pieces. All of those have to go, exceedingly well across the board. So you end up getting solutions that may not be in your mind what you had envisioned in terms of being the most exciting, the most user-friendly, but it's what's available. And then, over time, you've got, as the project's going along, if you run into any bumps in the road or, any type of issues, you're sort of back, to your legislatures, assemblies, state houses, or whatever your appropriations process is to sort of backfill anything that goes wrong. So implementations for state systems at a large level can be very, very difficult and full of lots of downside potential risks.
Yeah, particularly the risk. Government officials get made a little bit of fun of for being risk averse, but the slightest misstep in the implementation of systems like you're talking about gets you a lot of trouble and a lot of negative press and so on and so forth. Tyler, you have built a business on helping finance folks manage these challenges. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing and what the tools are to manage the challenges that they have to overcome to achieve their priorities.
Well, there's a lot in there, and there's some really great commentary there from Treasurer Eubanks, and I want to make a couple of different points as I was taking notes along the way. We in finance and treasury, we have a job to do. We have a critically important function to perform, and it must continue to perform. That was clearly articulated. But there are all of these additional potential valuable activities that we could be performing. There's much more that the team could go and do. But the core function must operate successfully. Okay. Without the promise of productivity gains coming from technology, it can be hard for those teams to say, I do have enough time to pursue these very valuable activities because they have to do what they have to do every single day. And so you combine that with some challenges around workforce. And now my existing system has to operate, but I can't continue to recruit in to give myself leverage to come up. You run into a major challenge. And the answer has to be, I need to find a way to automate. My belief is that I need to be able to automate away much of the operational, mundane, routine work that has to happen, that is really perfectly suited for a computer, so that I and my team can go and work on the more strategic initiatives. I think that's really important. I think Treasurer Eubank's point around not every technology offering being made purpose-built for folks like us, it makes perfect sense. I love telling this story. I have 3 little kids. I was on vacation with my family on spring break at the pool at 7 o'clock in the morning. I sat down and met a gentleman. He was an investor, invests in companies like ours. And I told him that I made treasury management and accounting software for governments. And he asked me, why in the heck would I do that? That they tell everybody not to do that, to go make software for other organizations. And that's a part of our problem. But encouragingly, that's changing. There is a lot of investor interest in serving teams like the team that works for Treasury Eubanks. And so my belief is that AI coming in should materially increase the productivity gains that are available. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Treasurer Eubank said just a moment ago, there's risk. Yes, there absolutely is. There's risk in not modernizing and just staying status quo and having an old archaic system, and there's risk in switching. So we're going to have to make a really educated and wise decision. Hopefully, we have modern, mature software companies, technology providers that are laser focused, so vertically focused on solving your particular challenges. And hopefully we can find that sweet spot, all of those together where it works for the budget, but it is strong, secure. I do have confidence in it, and we can implement the solution very, very well. And I have a lot of belief that the tune that treasurers are singing over the next 12, 24, 36, 48 months, it's going to be continuously improving. I really do believe that that is absolutely objectively true. And specifically relating to the implementation, this is an area where artificial intelligence, where AI will materially improve the speed with which a team can get to value, can get to implementation, but also can reduce the risk down for the treasury team or the finance team that Treasurer Eubanks appropriately identifies. Software implementations in finance are such a bear. There's such a tremendous, tremendous effort. And your team does not all of a sudden not have their regular job to do. They still have to go and do their regular job. I've talked to a lot of CFOs that have said, if I lose one more of my team members, I'm not going to be able to get that ERP implementation done. I don't think I can handle one more person leaving my organization. Where AI, I think, is going to materially help these things is by bringing in all of the source information, all of your historical information that might exist inside of a system, in whichever structure it is, pulling that out and getting that into a model where we can bring all of the source information together and then use it to restructure the information for the implementation, to check behind it. It's going to enable the teams that you are working with internally and your external partners, I think, to move materially faster. I think it will reduce the cost of implementation, which can be very, very significant for many of these organizations. Reduce the cost of implementation, the speed to value, and the accuracy, which is ultimately getting at the risk issue that Treasurer Eubanks is talking about. And so I'm sure most of the folks listening aren't really excited about, they don't dream about software implementations. I'm sure they do not. But if they were materially easier, and then we were able to have organizations focused on producing purpose-built solutions, gosh, we could go capture a bunch of that value. And then we could go do all of those really important activities that were being discussed here, that Justin discussed as well a moment ago.
So Justin, I'll turn to you, get your perspective on the challenges. But it does strike me, listening to Tyler, that the wise and careful and thoughtful implementation of AI is one of the major challenges.
Yeah, without a doubt. I would agree with everything that was just said. And when I think about, it's interesting, when I think about the implementation side of this, you can't help but put the professor hat on a little bit. And I know that there's several professors on the call too. I think one of the ways that we experience this as the people who are trying to develop the human capital to fill the needs that we've talked about here so far is that there is this, for lack of a better word, kind of generational shift that has been in the works now for some time, to the point that I would argue that if you are not adding to those risks of implementation and the opportunity costs of not implementing that Tyler was talking about. I would add to that the significant cost of it being materially more difficult to go out and recruit the human capital you're going to need to run these systems going forward. Um, Young people today coming into government, when they see antiquated systems, it sends a couple different messages. One is that you're not actually going to get to do a lot of the work that you thought you were going to do because you're going to be working, gathering data, cleaning data, working through manual processes that you weren't expecting to work through. So that's a big turnoff right from the beginning. But it also sends the message that all of these fancy tools that we teach them on machine learning, AI, increasingly sophisticated policy analysis, sophisticated organization theory, all the things that you think you're going to do when you go into government, you're not actually going to do because you're going to be spending a lot of time working in antiquated systems. But in many ways, the hardest part about all this, and the thing that I end up having to coach a lot of students through, is when they see antiquated systems, it suggests that there's a misalignment of values. They see an antiquated system and it suggests that the organization really isn't committed to the mission the way it says it's committed to the mission. It says it's committed to inertia, right? It says it's committed to the status quo. It says it's committed to, getting things done, even if it's done in a way that is noticeably less efficient or less effective than it could be done. So, I would add to the technical debt discussion, the risk of missing out on really great human capital, because a lot of people coming into government today are just expecting that the systems that they have are up to par with respect to the skills that they can offer. And more importantly, it allows them to do the work that they came to do rather than be distracted with a lot of things that they consider to be really unnecessary.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you touch on, Justin, in your responses so far is the interrelatedness between the sort of basic function of Treasury and the human capital and other kinds of things throughout the organization. So, Treasurer Eubanks, as you work day to day to make this stuff work and to do the job, what are some promising practices? What do you see that is sort of bright lights for the future, pushing you ahead?
Yes. I mean, I just wanted to second everything that Tyler and Justin said because, clearly we can't, show our new employees the kind of old systems that we have and keep them excited about their work. So, I mean, I think part of the bright, shiny object in the future are these systems, as I sort of touched on in the beginning, to say, here's something that to be excited about and something that maybe fits a little bit more closely when you're going through your, school experience of what your expectations were about what technology in a large organization would look like. So that would be really big. I think the other piece, I mean, just sort of zooming in a little bit on AI. AI brings a lot of fear, I think, to our staff. I think our staff, it continues to be concerned, like, is this technology that has the potential to replace my job or the work that I do? And I think we try to provide some reassurance that, I mean, or perhaps a responsibility check to say, I mean, this is another tool in your toolkit that you can use to help, do some of the work that you find to be tedious, not interesting. And it works through, some of those more minutia parts so that you can have a chance to look at it and read it and digest it as, a smart person that you are and a critical thinker, and use that to actually, be the underscoring of the work that you are doing versus having to do that whole front end piece of it. And I think that is exciting, and something that I hope that public servants and others that are kind of used to doing more clerical positions across government and other sectors can sort of see that. I mean, really, this is a technology, at least in the near to medium term, that is really, in our case in Michigan Treasury, it's not going to be replacing any jobs. It's just going to help make the jobs more interesting, help bring more decision making down to some of the frontline level instead of that just being purely clerical type work. And again, I mean, going back to some of the points that Tyler and Justin both made, allow us to be more effective and efficient and making the best use of taxpayer dollars.
If I could just add to that a couple of points and really well said. I've never met anybody in government finance that's told me that the list of things that they need to do is less than the time that they have to go and do it. Never in my life have I had that conversation. And so more productivity is going to allow us to go do more of those things faster. And the second point, and it's exactly what Treasurer Eubank said, another state treasury office that we started working with, when we were talking to the CFO, we were talking to her in the process. She said, I want my people working with the data. I don't want them working on the data. I want them working with the data. I want them to use it. I want them to grow in their careers. They will leave here. They will go someplace else. I want it to be because they came here, they worked with the data, they did all of the strategic work, they learned so much, and they went and took a better job, a bigger job someplace else. That's the mentality that we have to adopt. There's really, my belief, there's no avoiding it. We will use these things like we use the internet today, or we use computers. The productivity gain, it will come, it will not be perfect. Over time, we will get better and better at it. I've got some thoughts around that too, but it's really about getting people focused on the most valuable work that they can do for their organizations. Let's go do more of that.
Yeah,
One
the
quick,
truth out there exceeds our capacity to do it. So to the extent that we can add to that capacity, and I see that across the board with governments that are basically at or beyond their ability to do the work, technology is going to be the answer. They're not going to add lots more staff. They're not going to get lots more resources. It's a matter of the smart adoption of technology is basically the path toward survival and getting the work done in a viable kind of way. Tyler, I wanted to ask you though, as you look across your clients, uh, give us one or two of sort of the surprising, promising, good things that you see them doing.
Buying our software is a clear one. Uh, here's a really common example, and I'm going to broaden this out beyond just the state treasurers that we work with. I'll come down into the large local governments, the big cities and counties and school districts, and then into higher education as well, which is experiencing, like we all are, a really interesting time. Lots of investment going into their internal systems. So I'll share broadly. It is incredibly challenging right now to forecast. It's incredibly difficult to have a good handle on what your income is going to look like, what your expenses are going to look like over the next 13 weeks, but 6 months, 12 months, 24, beyond. Many of those organizations aren't forecasting. Many of those organizations are saying, this is impossible. I don't want to go and do it, or I don't have the time to do it, or I'll only forecast near term for the next few days or the next week or so. And so when we begin to work with organizations, one of the things that we're seeing is there's lots of interest in trying to at least go through the exercise of putting together a medium term and longer term cash forecast. Going and taking all of your existing bank data across all your different banks, bank accounts, pulling it in, categorizing it, and using that to then go and create better forecasts and then compare your forecast to your actuals every single day or every single week or every single month, however you want to do that. There are many, many organizations that are saying, we need to go and try to at least plan to better have an understanding of what's going to come out here in the future. And so they're putting systems in place to assist them with it. I've met many people that have been trying to do that or have been doing it in an Excel spreadsheet, but it takes a tremendous amount of time for somebody to go into a bank account, extract out the data, put it into an Excel file, categorize it, and then start to forecast it manually. So my belief is that there are lots of teams out there that are saying we need the productivity gains. We're able to get those, whether that's on debt or in cash or soon to be investments. But additionally, the process of planning, I think, is really, really important. And I won't get it exactly right, and I'm being daring here for doing it. A plan is worthless. Planning is incredibly valuable. Going through the process of doing the work with your team, I think, is critically important. I've got a lot of different examples of folks that have benefited materially from doing these kinds of exercises, and I could share more in detail, Mark, if you had some specific areas that you wanted me to dig into.
No, I think you've touched it. And uh, the your point on planning, yes, in periods of great volatility, which is what we are in right now, forecasting a diverse set of scenarios to me makes every bit of sense. Justin, what are you seeing in terms of promising practices in the field?
Yeah, everything Tyler mentioned, and it's a couple of things that have come up so far, which I think have been really promising. One thing that I would add, and I guess we can debate whether it's promising or not, but on the point about AI, are now, I think, starting to see an emerging reality, which is that we step aside from AI as a productivity tool, and we get to AI as a source of truth, which in many places it is rapidly becoming. There is then a natural fit between finance and AI in the same sense that audit lives in finance, or in the same sense that financial audit or performance audit lives in finance, and that core part of the finance and accounting skill set is the ability to discern one source of truth, right? And the ability to have chain of custody of data, and segregation of duties, and all of the sorts of internal control and other kinds of things that we do, so that when you have a final product, like instead of audited financial statements, you're able to say with some degree of certainty that yes, that is a fair representation of reality. There's an analog there in AI, right? To the extent that the data that we're using to train AI models is good and true and a good reflection of what's actually going on inside of an organization, then we can have a little bit more confidence in what sorts of solutions and answers AI provides us. If we don't, then it becomes a kind of garbage in, garbage out sort of a scenario. And so I think one of the promising things we are seeing is accounting, finance, state treasurers, others in that role being asked to kind of look at AI in much the same way that they look at auditing financial data, and the same way that they look at thinking about maintaining the sole source of truth for an organization. Again, we can debate whether that's a role finance and accounting wants, but I think it's one of these things they're inheriting, just if nothing else, by virtue of that skill set not necessarily living in any one other part of a government organization.
If I could, it's an important point, and it's something that we're excited about. If the organization has not modernized into a more current system and has different systems across different teams, purportedly presenting the same information, and we have AI capabilities used by the team, whether that's a simple ChatGPT functionality where I'm gonna export something and load it into a project, or if it's a software application with some capability built into it. We all know that artificial intelligence is just predicting for us what it believes to be true. And if it's informed by inaccurate information, it's not valuable to us. We must have good, clean information. And so when I think about my former role, I came up through investment banking and consulting. There are going to be many more data analysts in the future, ensuring that the information that the models are utilizing is absolutely accurate. That's going to be one of the most important areas for all of our different teams. The models will then be able to go and analyze and share out up to our senior leadership or individual team members. But I think about many organizations in Treasury where you might have a financial reporting or controller's office separate from the treasurer's office. Where's the debt accounting, bank reconciliation, investment management accounting? Like how's that work happening? And where's the information coming from? Because an AI agent on top of the controller's office spreadsheets for all their investment activity or their debt activity or whatever it might be might give you completely different answers than what's going to come up to the treasurer's office if it's being informed differently. And so you can see the clear benefit of unifying information across these teams, having fewer systems containing the same information that can unify the different teams together, empower them. It's very, very clear. And I think that what will ultimately begin to happen is that, which I think will continue to push forward these modernization projects, is I think people will see it implemented well in spaces. One application, one area, one discipline inside an organization. They'll see a modern database or data structure where artificial intelligence is just simply being utilized, natural language chat, come down in, I have this question, create this report for me. Very simple. Wow, that was a wonderful experience. My productivity gains have been tremendous. Why don't I have that same experience in this discipline and this discipline? And the answer is going to be because that's a spreadsheet-based process, or we don't have that information readily available to us. We need to get it from a third-party source or whatever it might be. And so I've deviated here slightly, but I think that what will ultimately happen is folks start to really experience the benefits here. They will say, gosh, why don't I have this everywhere else? It's like experiencing electricity for the first time. Like, gosh, like why can't we have this in my home at home? That would be really incredible for me to benefit materially there too. And then I think over time you'll see more and more adoption come through.
And if I could just add on to, I mean, Tyler's very good point about sort of streamlining the data that you have out there. This is a critical mindset shift for state treasuries and other governmental agencies, is thinking about keeping less data but higher quality data. This is so important that we've put it in our top 4 strategic goals for the entire department, because it's just critical with the advent of these technologies and the adoption of these technologies. It becomes more and more important. And I'll give you an example of like how we need to change from being data archivist to really strategic thinking about our data. Tax forms. So tax forms we used to have on our webpage, every tax form since the beginning of time. I'm not sure why we felt someone would need a tax form from 2004. That would be a very late return, but it was there. And we were processing taxes one year and realized, like, why are we getting all of these, tax returns on these old forms? And it didn't make sense. And so then we went and looked at, the outcome from one of the AI, instruments that folks were using. And if you put it in there, like, Michigan tax form, it was pulling, the wrong year. But it was pulling the wrong year because the year was available. We had made it available on our list of forms that's available out there on our website. So it turns out we are better serving the public, not having every piece of information from the beginning of time, but thinking very clearly and strategically, going back to how now we need more humans thinking strategically. What do people really need out there? It's more likely that folks are going to be using new technologies that's going to be pulling one thing, not giving them a list of things. So let's try to guide the systems along the way. And in the odd case that someone really does need something archival, we're always here. We're always an email away where they can get it, and trying to shift that mindset.
I think that's a really important point, and it's something that accountants and auditors have done, in my view, wrong for generations, is bury people in data and minutia and then dare them to sort of find what they actually really need. It's so I'm going to shift gears here, and I want to talk about. So you all have touched on the I guess volatility and uncertainty of the period that we're in, and part of that has been shifting major pieces of legislation. Two that I want to talk about: the Financial Data Transparency Act, which was and I believe is a very big deal. And then most recently, the One Big Beautiful Bill that the federal government adopted. Treasurer Eubanks, how do you see that legislation impacting your work?
Yeah, I mean, a few things. I mean, obviously, the Financial Data Transparency Act has been around for a few years now. So that's one that we are much deeper into understanding the implications of what it means for us and how we're thinking about the implementation of it. And I do want to appreciate or express my appreciation that Dave Sanchez was here representing the Municipal Enforcement Division of the SEC in this conference yesterday, and him continuing to meet with audiences and being so forthright about where they stand in their rulemaking process and how they're thinking about complying with this mandate. So I think that's been a great addition. But I mean, generally, we have to make, as a government, we have to make choices about what investments we're going to make using, scarce resources. And where it stands currently with the FDTA implementation, we have a series of proposed rules that have been out. We have not seen, any final rules come out of the joint rulemaking of the, 7 federal agencies or however many are involved. And so at this time, there's not really enough information that we see out there to change any of our investment strategies around that rulemaking process. And Dave talked about there's going to be another phase, and we're certainly looking forward to seeing what's in that. We, of course, it's a mandate. We will comply with whatever is out there, but currently, since we have no rules, we have no ability to ascertain what's needed. So we're sort of thinking about this from a very basic perspective until we see those final rules actually come out for us to decide about in the investment decisions we're going to make. With the Big Beautiful Bill, that being more recent, we're continuing to analyze the impacts of that at the state level. It's not just spending cuts and expenditure reductions, but it's also changes that are baked deep within the tax codes of each individual state. And oftentimes states will have conforming pieces of their tax code along with federal government tax policy. So, if they make a change at the federal level, it will flow through the impacts through to the state level. We are still working on quantifying that in Michigan and what it can mean, but the impacts, can be very significant in certain tax types, in particular some of the business tax types. So, we continue to monitor developments out of the federal government very, very closely, and all of these things have very real impacts on our day-to-day operations in Michigan.
Tyler, what are you hearing from your clients with regard to either or both of these bills?
Well, I don't engage daily with treasurers and CFOs, talking to them specifically about how the specifics of the bill or the FDTA might impact them today, but I'll share some perspectives around it. The first one I think is clear. If the federal government is going to continue to be a massive borrower in this market, and if the changes that we continue to make are going to increase the amount of federal debt, there could be some crowding out. There could be some increased interest rates that are passed along to organizations like state treasuries and local governments beyond. So thinking about forecasting for your future borrowing obligations and thinking about what future interest rates might be, well, if there is significant supply coming to market, maybe the demand that we have normally available is not going to be sufficient. Maybe some organizations, smaller organizations, may struggle to place their debt. So higher interest rates possible, of course, we shall see. I've talked to a number of different organizations specifically around the loss of maybe the SNAP program or loss of federal funding for certain organizations. And some of the feedback that I got back was, well, many of these programs or some of these programs, they're direct pass-throughs. So we receive money from the federal government, we allocate money from the federal government. So those executives and the boards will have to make some choices. Is this program important enough to us to continue to fund? Are we going to step up and plug this gap? Or are we going to let this benefit that's important, are we going to let it go? And that's a really tough decision that some of these organizations are going to have to make. You can again see there's lots of financial forecasting. There's lots of need for organizations to confidently answer the question. And that's ultimately where it comes down to. If you're an executive running a team in and around finance, you need to have a lot of confidence. You need to have confidence and control over your information and over the decisions that the executives, the leaders, are going to look to you to really guide them forward on. So I'm not on Capitol Hill all the time, but as I think about what the impacts of these things might be, I think about how could we possibly help those organizations? What could we do to give more confidence to the treasurers and the CFOs when they stand up in front of their boards, their teams that they're reporting to? They can have confidence saying, we've already run that, we've analyzed that, and we have confidence that this might be the outcome or this is an alternative.
I like confidence and control. Yes. So Justin, one of the bullets that we dodged was the elimination of the tax credit for debt. And I know you did some work on that. What are you seeing as the impact of these bills on government finance?
Yeah, lots of great points all around. Focusing specifically on the one big beautiful bill. As you mentioned, Mark, we were at our center able to do quite a bit of work trying to understand the impact of the municipal bond tax exemption at a really granular level, trying to understand. We worked at the congressional district level to try to inform the debate as it was unfolding, to be able to say to members of Congress, this is how many billions of dollars of school buildings have been built in your district. This is how many billions of dollars of water treatment facilities have been built in your district, and that sort of thing. And it was an interesting project, and we were fortunate to work with our partners at ICE Data Services and others to be able to look at the market in a way that it maybe hadn't been looked at up to that point. And we think that will, that information will continue to be useful if every so often the question of the exemption comes back around. This was the most recent iteration. And so it's helpful to have those sorts of data tools to be able to tell the story, take this really abstract thing called the tax exemption and make it very real to people. So that was great. I'm sure we'll continue to do that, and that discussion I'm sure will continue. We can spend all day talking about other parts of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It's a great time if you're in the spaceport business, which is a whole interesting discussion to have. But then there were a variety of other things that I think we're just starting to get some attention. You know, and we mentioned financial inclusion earlier as something that state treasurers are working on. Many state treasurers have, launched some version of baby bonds or savings accounts for young people. The new federal legislation has some of that. There's some just interesting discussion to see, exactly how that'll be implemented and whether that might supplant or put pressure on some of the other kinds of programs that are out there at both the state level and potentially even for things like Social Security. So we'll have to see, how that goes. But as we are getting into some of the details on what's included in that bill, there's parts of it that overlap and maybe even directly conflict with some of the things that have been happening at the state and local level for some time. I think the last point I would make about it too, we've almost now immediately pivoted to kind of what comes next. And of course, what's likely to come next is the sequestration process, depending on exactly how expensive the One Big Beautiful Bill turns out to be. And if you're familiar at all with the dynamics within the municipal bond market, the sequestration process is this sort of Groundhog Day thing that we keep dealing with every time the sequestration question is on the table. It calls into question the whole range of direct federal subsidies that are in the municipal bond market. Traditionally, that was things like Build America bonds, which a lot of issuers financed out of precisely to avoid the uncertainty that surrounded the sequestration risk. But there's a lot of other kinds of borrowing tools out there that are backed either directly or indirectly through some sort of federal appropriation or promise of a federal appropriation. And if sequestration, forces a pullback on a lot of that kind of federal support, then a big segment of the market will be, kind of upended. So we're looking to see at, as the implementation of the One Big Beautiful Bill happens, what's the price tag, and will that force other fiscal policy changes that might have other kinds of downstream effects on the municipal market?
So, Treasurer Eubanks, I saw you start to nod your head whenever Justin was talking about the impact of sequestration. And so there are, even beyond the big, beautiful bill, there's all this back and forth on tariffs and the other sorts of things that, it really is in a period of incredible economic uncertainty. How is that impacting your work?
Yeah, well, one of Michigan Treasury's responsibilities is forecasting, economic forecasting and revenue forecasting, and trying to do a realistic economic and revenue forecast in the face of, changing policies as significant as trade policy in a state where, we've got a significant auto manufacturing presence, and that auto manufacturing presence has been built around the assumption that free trade will exist, and so you'll have a part that's manufactured and it will cross the border up to 8 times back and forth between Michigan and Canada before it actually, sort of arrives in its final form to go into a vehicle. And so, thinking about that and what that can mean to the cost of vehicles and what that would mean to the actual, amount of vehicle sales and associated jobs associated with it can be very difficult when we don't know what the underlying policy is. And specifically, it's not just, the headline discussions around it, but the details behind it. The details really matter. Going back and forth across the border, that's a detail that's in trade policy. Is it going to be 1 time? Is it going to be 6 times that the tariff will be assessed? And, all of those components make a big difference in terms of what we think are the impact to our economy and revenue. So it's a difficult time to be an economic revenue forecaster in this uncertainty.
So, Justin, here's a question that came in. This is from Stephanie Leiser, but this is for you. Recognizing the downside risks of innovation, how do you see the role of university partners like the Center for Municipal Finance and others changing?
Yeah, great question. And thank you, Stephanie. And Stephanie and her team's work in Michigan, I think, has been really instructive on this to sort of show what it looks like when it's well done. I think Tyler Trout actually told me one time that great ideas don't come fully baked, right? They need time to be worked out. You need somebody willing to take that risk on implementation. You have to give, somebody that others can look to learn from their mistakes, to be able to see what it looks like to take on these really challenging, kinds of things like in the case of the work that Stephanie's team has done, converting over to XBRL, or any of the kinds of implementation and technological challenges that we've talked about here today. So, yeah, universities can play a really, really important role in that. Not only trying to understand the costs of implementation, some of the unexpected challenges of implementation, but really importantly, to understand the sort of the experience of implementation from the perspective of the technical finance and accounting people who are actually tasked with doing that implementation. One of the things we've talked about multiple times here already is that people still have to do their regular jobs while they're implementing these tools. What exactly does that look like? How do those day-to-day trade-offs work? How taxing is it? How quickly do those productivity gains begin? All of those sorts of questions. It's helpful to have a human who is an accountant or a finance expert and not necessarily a technology person, be able to tell that story from their perspective and really help to sort of bring others into that process and feel a little bit better about what they're getting into should they decide to take the leap to do those sorts of implementations. So yeah, I think that's a great model. I think universities can do a lot more of it. We're certainly trying to do our part, but I'd encourage anyone at a university that has that kind of capacity to try to extend it as far as you can, because we can play a really important role in that.
And if I could just add, because Justin can't say it, it adds a lot of credibility. If we were to evaluate something and make a decision and, it's something that's, I don't know, controversial, or there's a big, economic component, to have it verified by, great academic minds like Justin's really helps us make our case. So the credibility component is important for us too.
I think that's a really good point to make. Tyler, I know that you've been sort of watching carefully the FDTA from the beginning. As the data is digitized, it becomes much easier to do a lot of the work that you want to do. And now, really for me, this is the last year or two since the FDTA was implemented, is there's been tremendous rise in AI. And I know you've talked in this session, but in others, about AI. How does AI fit into the FDTA framework from your point of view?
Well, I won't have a perfect answer for this conversation. The answer is it should materially, hopefully, increase the ability for organizations. My hope would be to comply. I think that technology, if I can broaden out beyond AI and the FDTA broadly, technology should be able to benefit these organizations really meaningfully in and around financial reporting. So I want to take your question. I want to put it over here and make a point really quick, and I'll come back to it. I'm incredibly excited. Had a really exciting meeting today talking to organizations, not on the treasury side, but organizations that are investing in the debt that our nation's treasurers are managing. Those conversations that I have when I start talking to them about the information that's being utilized by the financial consultant, by the investment banker, broker dealer, by the investor, larger organizations down to smaller organizations, it's really, really clear that the flow of information that's inside a system that Treasurer Eubanks may have to somebody who might be very interested in that information because they own $100 million or $1 million of the debt that's being supported from the revenues of that organization. There's a lot of exciting opportunity here. There's a lot of exciting work that's happening. And while the FDTA, I know, is going to be viewed as a burden, additional work, additional regulatory requirements for organizations to comply with. And that's true. It's a regulation. We're going to have to produce certain financial disclosures in machine readable format. I think that a couple of things. Broadly speaking, finding ways to make information more readily available, which I don't believe the FDTA is going to necessarily do. It's not going to all of a sudden produce a more frequent disclosure that's available to an investor. But I am very, very excited about having this conversation in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, where potentially there is a way for the technology that Treasurer Eubanks has implemented to give her and her team the capability to materially improve the accuracy and frequency and depth of financial disclosure should she determine that that's advantageous for her organization. into the municipal securities industry, into the investing community. I talk to a lot of these folks quite often, and there's a tremendous amount of demand for materially improved and materially more frequent financial information to come out of these organizations. And I've always said this, as long as our nation's treasurers and CFOs, as long as our nation's governments and expanding into nonprofits, healthcare, higher education, transit, as long as they are managing much of their information in an Excel spreadsheet, they will be one of the they will be slowed down. The dissemination of financial information will be materially harder, will take materially longer. And so I'm very excited about thinking about a modernization of a core system, data unity that we talked about before, and utilization of AI to improve the ability for a team to operate. And then can we take that information and make it materially more available for the investing community? So I'm like not answering the question completely there. We're obviously building products to help with these solutions, and we're very excited about using AI to materially reduce the time to conversion or whatever it might be. I think it's got a big part to play. I think there's no doubt that that's objectively true. I think the healthy thing is there are going to be a lot of different technology companies and nonprofit organizations, other organizations trying to assist our nation's governments and nonprofits with the implementation of the rule. We don't know all the answers yet. We don't know what the final rule is, but like as we go forward towards that, I think AI is coming at a really nice time for us and getting it into solutions. It's just going to be really exciting to see how it all shakes out. Not the world's best answer, kind of bobbed and weaved a little bit, but that's, I think, my perspective.
All right. Justin, we've got about 2 minutes left. What is the one takeaway that you want to leave with this group?
Always dangerous to put a professor on a short time frame, but yeah, I think the thing that jumps out to me, and it's come up multiple times here today, is just how intertwined the human capital element is with the technology element. And I would just reiterate what we said before, that those working in government finance, thinking about technology and technical debt in particular, add to the list of sources of technical debt the fact that it'll get a lot harder to recruit the kind of talent you need to be able to work and provide these essential services, provide these critical functions without the kinds of systems that we're talking about here today. Absolutely essential. We overlook that. I think we can't say it often enough.
And Treasurer Eubanks, I'll give you the last word. What is the one thought you want to leave this group with?
As a leader in a large organization, I mean, I can say without hesitation that the most important asset that any of us have are our people. And while we've got technology, coming in at a very rapid pace, I mean, we really have to think of it as a way to augment and get the most out of our people, including engagement and excitement about the work that they're doing and serving the public. So technology is not something to be scared of, and we can definitely harness that to do our jobs as public servants even better.
Well, thank you. So thank you, Treasurer Eubanks, Tyler Trout, Justin Marlowe. Really interesting and for me, fun conversation with you this afternoon. Thank you all very much.